The email hits your inbox at 7:41 on a Monday. Subject line: Formal Performance Improvement Plan. Action required. It's from Denise, the same Denise who has a framed photo of a deceased golden retriever on her desk and a candle on her windowsill that smells faintly of vanilla. You read it standing at the broken coffee machine, then you sit down. Because Denise from HR is putting a 30-day termination clock on the person who secretly owns the holding company that controls this entire firm, a business generating $22 million in annual recurring revenue with a crisp 28% EBITDA margin. You built this company 6 years ago. You engineered its operational architecture, and this morning, the system you created to ruthlessly purge underperforming overhead just turned its blade on you. The PIP cites 3 documented incidents. On paper, they look like a slam-dunk case for immediate termination. In reality, they are a masterclass in corporate blind spots, weaponized by middle managers who don't understand the math of their own departments. Incident 1. The file states you skipped a mandatory Q3 Regional Operations Alignment session in Conference Room B last Tuesday at 2 o'clock. The deep irony is that you personally approved the $85,000 capital expenditure for that room's renovation last year, down to the acoustic paneling. Nobody told you the meeting existed because it was the announcement party for Derek's promotion to director, a role handling a division currently underperforming its quarterly targets by 14%. Your manager, Greg, structurally excluded you from the invite list so you wouldn't ask difficult questions in front of the VP, but a low-level assistant pulled the raw, unfiltered general corporate roster to log mandatory attendance, marking you as an automatic no-show when the badge reader registered an empty slot. Incident 2. IT security. Flagged 3 late-night login events to the core payroll and general ledger systems, 11:40 p.m., 1:17 a.m., and 10:50 p.m. on a Sunday. To an analyst looking at a security dashboard, it looks like a rogue mid-level employee digging into restricted financial data. In reality, you were tracking a 3.8% margin compression in Greg's department. You caught a $14,000 monthly vendor retainer escalation that Greg had quietly signed off on without board authorization. You were mapping the transaction history to build a case for his dismissal. The monitoring tool simply didn't know your employee ID and your ownership credential belonged to the same person. Incident 3. The one that actually pushed Greg to run to HR. He documented a pattern of resistance to leadership decisions. This entire charge stems from a single, quiet sentence you asked him behind a closed door 3 weeks ago, after you found out Derek got the director title. What specific performance metrics separated Derek's operational file from mine? Given that my team closed Q2 at 112% of quota, while his sat at 88%, Greg panicked, realized he couldn't answer the math, and wrote up a formal complaint to shield himself from his own political exposure. Greg had no idea that the quiet question you asked him behind a closed door didn't just expose his incompetence, it threatened to trip the wire on a massive, multi-million-dollar corporate sting operation you had been systematically laying beneath his feet for the last 36 months. When your holding entity acquired this firm, the previous founders boasted about a 180-person headcount like it was a badge of honor, but your forensic audit revealed a dying engine. The revenue per employee sat at a miserable $55,000, while a healthy infrastructure firm requires a minimum of $140,000 just to sustain profitability. The company wasn't growing. It was operating as a bloated adult daycare, bleeding cash through unbilled client scope creep and redundant middle management layers who spent their days scheduling meetings to prepare for other meetings. The core of the rot was the sales incentive structure. The previous management team was paying out massive bonuses based on total contract value rather than net margin. Sales reps were closing complex accounts at predatory discounts just to hit their personal top-line targets, leaving the fulfillment teams to work hundreds of unbillable hours on projects that actively lost the company money. You can't fix a culture that's broken from the top down. If you had shown up as the billionaire owner in a tailored suit, they would have just hid the rot. So you created a shadow persona. You hired yourself through your own automated portal as a mid-level operations strategist, took a standard cubicle on the second floor, 12 feet away from the water cooler, and began executing a ruthless operational overhaul from the trenches. Strategy 1 was headcount rationalization without destruction. You didn't do brutal, sweeping layoffs that destroy company morale. Instead, you spent 6 months quietly tracking utilization rates directly from the project management software. Every time a non-essential coordinator or middle manager left the firm voluntarily, you froze the role. You consolidated 5 fractured, low-output departments into 3 lean, high-performing units, doubling the remaining key employees' salaries while cutting total departmental overhead by 42%. Over 2 years, natural attrition brought the headcount down from 180 to 114, while total operational output actually increased. Strategy 2 was a calculated assault on the client contracts. You pulled every major account file at night, reviewing the billable hours at home on a secure laptop. You discovered the sales team had locked the company into flat-rate retainers based on outdated 2021 pricing models, essentially forcing the firm to subsidize client operations out of its own margins. You designed a dynamic pricing framework that tied fees directly to engineering sprints, routed it through your external counsel, and passed it down as a mandatory mandate from anonymous ownership. 2 legacy clients threw a tantrum and left. You let them go without a fight. The math showed those 2 clients accounted for 30% of the customer service burden while generating less than 4% of the net margin. Reclaiming that wasted bandwidth allowed your team to pivot and land a healthcare tech provider out of Dallas on a clean $1.8 million annual recurring retainer. By the 12-month mark, the revenue per employee skyrocketed from $55,000 to a highly profitable $165,000. The company was finally breathing, and nobody on the floor had any idea that the quiet strategist eating a turkey sandwich at their desk was the architect of the entire turnaround. Well, almost nobody. Phil, the night security guard, had been watching the building for 11 years. On a rainy Tuesday night 9 months ago, it was past midnight. You were the last one left on the second floor, pacing the empty corridor on a secure speakerphone call with your legal counsel, finalizing the corporate restructuring numbers. You walked past the lobby, and Phil was sitting at his desk, his crossword puzzle pushed aside, watching you with the look of a man who had finally pieced a long puzzle together. He had seen the corporate cars arrive. He knew whose phone calls lined up with the board's unexpected capital injections. You hung up the phone, said goodnight, and he just nodded, giving nothing away. 3 weeks later, he stopped you at the glass doors. He looked at your badge, then looked you in the eye and said, "You're not just fixing spreadsheets up there, are you?" You gave him a pleasant, corporate smile and said, "Phil, I'm just trying to keep the servers running." Phil stared for a long beat, picked his pen back up, and said, "Understood, boss. Servers look real good lately." He never breathed a word to anyone, but from that night on, you noticed the parking garage gates were always cleared for your car, and the building security logs for the second floor were meticulously kept clean. So, that is the actual context behind Denise's PIP. That is what she saw, and why she wasn't entirely crazy for writing it. She is an HR director who watched a mid-level operations guy quietly command the entire structural flow of the company with zero visible authority. Every major corporate pivot over the last 2 years legally traced back to an anonymous directive from ownership, but physically traced right back to your cubicle login metadata. She thought she was hunting a rogue employee running a shadow coup against leadership. She did her job. You call Warren from the parking garage, sitting in your car with the engine off. Warren is your external legal counsel and the only visible face of the private holding entity. You read him the PIP line by line, including the exact policy codes. For the first time in 6 years, Warren goes completely silent. "Formally, if this isn't resolved in 30 days, it's termination for cause," Warren says, his voice losing its usual steadiness. No severance, no negotiation. The language states that multiple Tier 1 compliance violations override any departmental appeal. The system removes the human element entirely. You swallow hard. You remember writing that exact clause at your kitchen table 6 years ago, to prevent bloated middle management from protecting their underperforming friends. Now, you are reading your own safeguard as a loaded weapon pointed directly at your chest. Warren doesn't fix it by throwing his weight around or blowing your cover. He fixes it the boring way, the legal way. He quietly routes ironclad documentation to Denise from a compliance audit address she has no authority to question. 9 days later, you are called into Denise's office. You expect a status update. You don't expect Greg to be sitting there already. He is sitting with his legs crossed, holding a coffee, looking smug. He genuinely thinks he is about to witness your professional execution. Denise doesn't waste time. She opens a folder, her expression deadpan. "I wanted us all in the same room for this," she says, pulling out the corporate transcript. Following an external compliance review of the note dated the 14th regarding a pattern of resistance, this office finds the claim completely unsubstantiated. The data shows one exchange. One highly specific, metric-driven question regarding performance alignment. The item is withdrawn from your file in full. Greg clears his throat, his smugness evaporating instantly. He shifts his weight. "Denise, in the moment," the tone felt. "I have the transcript, Greg," Denise interrupts, not even looking up. "It was 4 sentences long. You're welcome to review it." Greg shuts his mouth. His face does that specific, painful thing human faces do, when the lie they've been telling themselves to feel powerful evaporates in front of an audit. Denise moves through the rest of the file with surgical precision. The attendance flag? Cleared by Warren's original time-stamped attendee list, showing you were never assigned to the meeting. The IT security violation? Reclassified against a legitimate corporate credential authorized for secondary equity oversight. Case closed. The system cleared you by the narrowest possible margin it allows. Walking back to your desk, the immediate threat is gone, but the long-term execution is just beginning. You pass Derek's new corner office. He is adjusting a plant on his windowsill, completely unaware that his department's budget is about to be slashed by 15% in next quarter's restructuring because his numbers don't back his title. You pass Bry, a junior coordinator you quietly saved from a bad PIP last month by forcing a KPI adjustment through Warren. She is smiling, currently finalizing a $650,000 enterprise contract. You sit at your cubicle and make 3 quiet decisions that will reshape this company forever. First, you leave the system's loophole open. Warren asks if you want your name placed on a permanent exemption list so this paperwork can never reach you again. You tell him no. An appeals process only matters if it actually works under extreme pressure, even yours. If you exempt yourself, the system stops being fair for the other 114 people in this building. Second, you accept that good intentions mean nothing without flawless paperwork. A meeting you were blocked from attending still printed out as a failure, and a security credential built to protect the company still flagged you as a threat. The system doesn't care about your intent, it cares about your data. And finally, you keep the secret. You don't fire Greg today, and you don't demote Derek yet. The version of the story where you blow up the building to feed your ego is vastly inferior to the version where the system simply worked exactly the way it was designed to. You let them play their games while you play the math. You leave the building at 6:30 p.m., the last one out, as always. Phil, the security guard, looks up from his crossword puzzle as you approach the lobby doors. He looks at you for a long beat, taps his pen against the desk, and nods. "Good night, boss," he says. You smile, step out into the cool evening air, and finally reach into your pocket for your car keys. The company is operating at a clean 28% net margin now, up from the messy 4% it had when you first walked into this building. The system is cold, and it is dangerous, but it works. You start the car,